Chapter 17. Gold Money in the United States. 1. Pre-constitutional and colonial experiments with coinage. Before the United States emerged as a sovereign entity with a unified golden anchor, the American colonies existed in a state of chronic and desperate currency famine. The British Crown, adhering to strict mercantilist principles, viewed the colonies as a source of raw materials, rather than a site for financial infrastructure. Consequently, the export of official English silver and gold coins to the Americas was strictly forbidden. This forced the early settlers into a chaotic laboratory of monetary improvisation, where the very definition of value was as wild and unpredictable as the frontier itself. In this vacuum of official specie, the colonies turned to commodity money. In the Virginia and Maryland tidewaters, tobacco was legally established as currency. Taxes were paid in leaf, and warehouses issued tobacco notes that functioned as primitive paper money. In the North, the colonists adopted wampum, the polished shell beads of the Narragansett and Pequot peoples, setting official exchange rates for white and purple beads. However, these organic currencies were prone to physical decay, gluts in production, and a lack of the portability and divisibility essential for a modern economy. The true blood of colonial trade, however, was a motley assortment of foreign metal, most notably the Spanish milled dollar, the piece of 8. Minted from the vast silver mines of Potosi and Mexico, these coins trickled into the colonies through trade with the West Indies. Yet this reliance on foreign metal created a fractured landscape. Colonial assemblies, desperate to lure silver to their local markets, engaged in a competitive devaluation. A Spanish dollar might be declared worth 5 shillings in New York, but 6 shillings in Pennsylvania, leading to a monetary border war where merchants had to navigate a bewildering thicket of local exchange rates. This era was a period of profound monetary anxiety. Without a central mint or a fixed gold-to-silver ratio, the American experiment began in a world where money was a shifting phantom. It was this very chaos, the pine tree shillings of Massachusetts being clipped and melted, the depreciating continental currency of the Revolution, and a lack of a stable physical anchor that would eventually drive the Founding Fathers toward the cold, uncompromising logic of the gold and silver standards. 2. Alexander Hamilton's Report on the Mint, 1791. The conceptual foundation of the American financial system was forged not by a committee, but by the sharp analytical mind of Alexander Hamilton. As the first Secretary of the Treasury, Hamilton inherited a fiscal wasteland, a mountain of war debt, and a citizenry still traumatized by the worthless continental paper currency. In January 1791, he presented his report on the establishment of a mint to Congress, a document that served as the architectural blueprint for the nation's monetary sovereignty. Hamilton's goal was to marry the abstract concept of national credit to the physical reality of precious metal, creating a currency that was honest enough to command respect in the marble counting houses of Europe. Hamilton's masterstroke was the proposal of a bimetallic standard. He rejected the idea of using gold or silver exclusively, fearing that relying on a single metal would leave the young republic vulnerable to sudden shifts in supply. Instead, he proposed a legal ratio of 15-1, declaring that 15 pounds of pure silver would be equal in value to 1 pound of pure gold. The dollar was chosen as the unit of account, a nod to the familiar Spanish silver coins, but it was defined with mathematical precision. 371.25 grains of pure silver, or 24.75 grains of pure gold. This dual tethering was intended to ensure a steady supply of circulating coins for the common man, while providing a high-value gold backbone for large-scale commerce and banking. However, Hamilton's brilliance was immediately tested by the invisible hand of the global market. The 15-1 ratio was a static legal decree in a world of moving prices. Shortly after the mint began operations in Philadelphia, the market value of gold began to rise slightly above the 15-1 mark. Following Gresham's law, which states that bad money drives out good, gold became more valuable as bullion than as coin. Consequently, gold vanished from American circulation, fleeing to Europe where it could be sold for more silver. For the first few decades of its life, the United States was a bimetallic nation on paper, but a silver nation in practice. While Hamilton's ratio was eventually defeated by the market, his report succeeded in its most vital mission. It transformed the dollar from a colonial abstraction to a physical, legal, and geological reality. 3. The Act of 1834 and the shift to a gold-preferred system. By the 1830s, the United States was undergoing a massive territorial and economic expansion, and the absence of gold in the domestic money supply became an intolerable drag on growth. The Jacksonian era brought a new political willpower to bring the gold back. In a calculated move to reverse the flow of metal, Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1834, often referred to as the Gold Bill. This legislation boldly adjusted the legal ratio from Hamilton's 15-1 to 16-1. By slightly undervaluing silver and overvaluing gold at the mint, the government effectively signaled to the world that America was open for gold business. The impact was instantaneous and transformative. Gold, which had been hiding in European vaults, began to pour into the United States, to be exchanged for the now undervalued silver. The American currency landscape turned from dull gray to brilliant yellow. This was the moment the United States became a de facto gold standard nation. Silver coins became so rare that they practically disappeared from daily use, leaving only copper cents and gold coins to facilitate trade. The Act of 1834 was the Great Pivot. It predated the massive gold rushes of the mid-19th century, meaning that when the pioneers eventually found gold in California and later in Nome, the American legal system was already rigged in gold's favor. The 16-1 ratio became more than just a number. It became a political dogma that would spark the fiercest populist battles of the century, eventually leading to the total demonetization of silver and the undisputed reign of the gold sovereign. 4. The 1873 discontinuance of silver and the crime of 1873. In the aftermath of the Civil War, the American monetary system was a fractured mosaic of greenback paper notes and a slow return to metal. But in the quiet halls of Congress in 1873, a seemingly routine piece of legislation was passed that would alter the course of history. The Coinage Act of 1873 was ostensibly designed to modernize the mint's operations, but buried within its technical jargon was a lethal blow. It omitted the standard silver dollar from the list of authorized coins. With the stroke of a pen, silver, the people's money that had been a pillar of American bimetallism since Hamilton, was stripped of its right to be freely coined. The move was so subtle that many in Congress did not realize its implications until months later, when the global price of silver began to plummet due to massive new discoveries in the Comstock lode and the German Empire's shift to gold. To the indebted farmers of the West and the silver miners of Nevada, this was not an administrative update, it was a judicial coup. They dubbed it the crime of 1873. By demonetizing silver, the government had effectively contracted the money supply just as the nation's economy was expanding. This created a deflationary spiral that made debts harder to pay and gold more powerful than ever. This period was the beginning of the Great Deflationary War. For the next quarter century, American politics would be haunted by the ghost of the silver dollar. Populist movements, led by figures like William James Bryan, would scream for the free coinage of silver to break the cross of gold. Yet the 1873 Act had successfully placed the United States on a direct, irreversible path toward the international gold standard. The crime had effectively cleansed the system of silver's volatility, ensuring that only the yellow metal, the favorite of international bankers and the emerging industrial elite, would dictate the value of the American dream. 5. The Gold Standard Act of 1900 and its long-term effects. The final decisive victory for gold came not through a secret crime, but through an explicit law born of the massive gold rushes in the Klondike and Nome. By 1900, the Silverites had been defeated at the ballot box, and the influx of new gold from the North had eased the deflationary pressure that had fueled the populist rage. On March 14, 1900, President William McKinley signed the Gold Standard Act, officially and unequivocally declaring gold as the sole standard of value for the United States. This act was the apotheosis of gold. It legally defined the dollar as 25.8 grains of gold, 9/10 fine, and mandated that the Treasury maintain a massive gold reserve of $150 million to ensure the convertibility of all paper currency. The act did more than just settle a debate. It integrated the United States into the International Gold Club. With the American dollar now a fixed weight of gold, international trade became seamless. An investor in London could buy American railroad bonds with the absolute certainty that the dollar he was promised would be identical in weight and value to the sovereign in his vault. The long-term effects were profound. The 1900 Act provided the bedrock for the golden age of American industrial expansion. However, it also created a rigid, inflexible system. By tying the hands of the government to a physical quantity of metal, it ensured that the economy could only grow as fast as the gold could be pulled from the earth. This was both the system's greatest strength and its ultimate flaw. It provided a century of stability, but it left the nation vulnerable to the shocks of the 20th century, the total wars and global depressions that would eventually demand a level of paper flexibility that the cold, hard logic of the 1900 Act could never permit.